Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And since the dawn of the new year, we've investigated some of the Fallout universe's most strange and supernatural themes, including the Dunwich mystery and the curious case of the Zayton aliens, respectively. And today, I'd like to continue that trend by breaking down yet another surprisingly occult force in the wasteland: the Children of Atom. The Children of Atom, or Atomites as we will sometimes refer to them as, are a strange cult of radiation worshippers who have spread across the East Coast since the Great Collapse. Some of their chapters are friendly and charitable, while others are outright violent and aggressive, though all seek to embrace and expand Atom's glow. First appearing in Fallout 3, though clearly inspired by factions from even earlier games, which we'll get into later, the Children initially come across as a rather unhinged sect of people, with weird rituals and a strange enthusiasm for one of the world's most destructive forces. However, at the same time, there are subtle hints throughout the games that the Atomites perhaps could be onto something. Their members often demonstrate an astounding resilience, if not outright immunity, to the effects of radiation. Congregation leaders seem to possess an assortment of supernatural insights. Strange, Lovecraftian themes are present in many of their settlements, and we can even encounter a few atomic deities throughout the games. So, what's the deal with these people? Are they genuinely following the one true faith as they so claim? Or are there more terrestrial explanations for what's happening here? Well, that is what we are going to set out to investigate today. We're going to examine the Children's appearance in each of the Bethesda Fallout games, and yes, even kinda 76, we'll get into that, with a particular attention to their more unique powers and beliefs. And hopefully, by the time all's squared away, decide whether or not their deity is as authentic as they claim. Now, let me just say that throughout most of our video, we're going to be searching for more worldly and scientific justifications behind the mysteries of Atom. However, towards the end, I'm also going to entertain some more paranormal explanations as well. I don't want to spoil anything or sound too crazy, but it would be very helpful to watch our previous exploration of the Dunwich mystery. Though that'll all come in at the end, and I'll have spark notes for those of you who don't have an extra hour and a half to spare. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, grab an ice-cold glass of Vim Cherry, set your Miss Handy to silent mode, and relax, as we begin our investigation of the Fallout universe's greatest faith. But first, quick word from today's video sponsor. Now, if you're not a fan of radiation in your water, but are still looking for a bit of a zero-calorie zing, then today's video sponsor may be right for you. Air Up is an entirely new water drinking system that combines a new type of bottle with aromatizing flavor pods, which flavor water through scent rather than through sugars and aspartame. The pods and bottle work together to infuse your beverage with what are essentially scented and flavored bubbles, which you'll taste, just not with your tongue. As someone who spends several hours a week biking like a maniac through my hometown, Air Up has made my rides just that much more bearable by bringing me my favorite flavors without putting a dent into my diet. Which is kind of the whole reason I'm biking in the first place. I'm trying to get away from the effects of sugars and anyway. So, when you're done with this video, be sure to check out my link in the description or pinned comment and visit AirUp's website, where you can learn more and hopefully get started. Now, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Alright, so while our story will be taking us across the Fallout franchise, I think the most obvious place to start our investigation is at the beginning, with Fallout 3, as this was the game that introduced the Children of Atom to the franchise, and it offers us an incredible amount of useful context and insight onto the faction's history, which will aid us tremendously down the line. Thus, let's pack up our Brahmin caravans and make our way to the great capital wasteland. specifically to the metallic metropolis of Megaton, located just south of Vault 101. Upon entering the town, we'll be approached by Lucas Sims, Megaton's sheriff and the closest thing it has to a true leader. Lucas welcomes us to his settlement, though warns us of the active atomic bomb that lies in the town square. He explains that the device's presence has given rise to a strange cult, calling themselves the Children of Atom, which now worship it as a sort of deity. Before sending us on our way, Sims will offer us 500 caps if we, or anyone we know, can disarm the device and end its threat to the town. This begins the quest, The Power of Atom, and it's, in my opinion, one of Bethesda's most iconic missions. Indeed, at the town square, we will find both the bomb and the cultists the sheriff alerted us to. As the Children of Atom's leader, a man named Confessor Cromwell will be standing before the device and delivering a sermon to a small group. Kinda like Heimskr from Skyrim, though with more followers. His entire speech is rather lengthy, but here's a small sample.
He is coming with the clouds, and every eye shall be blind with his glory. Every ear shall be stricken deaf to hear the thunder of his voice. Let the men, women, and children of the earth come forth to gather and behold the power of Atom.
When approached directly, Cromwell will immediately stop what he's doing and warmly receive the lone wanderer, before enthusiastically explaining his faith's beliefs.
The Church of the Children of Atom is based on the idea that each single atomic mass in all of creation contains within it an entire universe. When that atomic mass is split, a single universe divides and becomes two, thus signifying the single greatest act of Atom's creation. Occasionally, a divine event occurs, and trillions upon trillions of new universes are created. The last such event took place here 200 years ago. Where most of the lost children of Atom see that event as simple war and devastation, we see creation and unification in Atom's glow.
Interestingly, in other lines of dialogue, the Confessor suggests that he inherited his position from a long line of previous confessors who led the congregation. His position is not unlike that of a bishop, or perhaps even pope, as he seems to manage not only religious affairs, but also deals with town disputes, and seems to perform a reasonable amount of charity as well. Notably, we can offer to donate caps to the Atomites in exchange for a small positive karma boost, which gives some idea of how Bethesda views the faction morally. Interestingly though, despite these positive and charitable attributes, the Atomites seem to harbor a somewhat dark desire. If we mention our desire to defuse the bomb to the Confessor, he'll lash out at us and demand that we do no such thing, claiming that messing with the device would be akin to sacrilege. Alternatively, if the player suggests that they actually want to detonate it instead, he'll seem rather chill with the idea, thinking the explosion would be something of a divine baptism. It's very strange. Nonetheless, just a few feet away from their holy site lies the Children of Atom's proper church. The structure is modest in its character, consisting of no more than some ramshackle rusted tin plates and some duct tape. At the top of the building is this neat little makeshift atom molecule, which is a nice touch and we'll come back to later. Inside, we'll find Mother Maya, Confessor Cromwell's wife, tending to the pews and overseeing a small present congregation. Her dialogue is rather limited, referring us to her husband for most questions about religious matters, though she does share the Confessor's desire to see the device at the center of the town remain active, and perhaps even detonated. Now, funnily enough, a look in the game files, as well as at certain lines of their own dialogue, reveals that both Mother Maya and her husband Cromwell are barely in their early 40s. They're not even really middle-aged yet, despite each of them donning extremely elderly appearances. This could perhaps be a symptom of their constant radiation worship and exposure. There's even reason to suspect they've been drinking irradiated water, which can't be good for the skin, but their old appearances could also just be a consequence of Fallout 3's wacky NPC design. Several supposedly young characters in the Capital Wasteland boast similarly elderly aesthetics. So who really knows what Bethesda meant by this, if anything? Additionally, something a little off topic worth asking is, given the Adamites' reverence for radiation, how do they feel about ghouls? The town of Megaton itself is only home to one, a man named Gob, who involuntarily helps tend the local bar alongside Colin Moriarty, and is treated as a second-class citizen by most of his neighbors. He makes it clear that his fellow citizens treat him with the utmost disdain, and poor Gob leads a rather miserable life. Although, there is good reason to think that the local church is a bit more respectful. While there's no dialogue that alludes to this possibility, the Fallout 3 official game guide, published by Prima Games and written by Bethesda, contains the following interesting passage about Gob. Take a listen. Quote, "Treated as a freakish second-class citizen by many people in Megaton, particularly Colin Moriarty, Gob is skittish and nervous, always looking over his shoulder. He does his best to maintain a sense of humor and be friendly with customers, but this is mostly out of a desire not to be beaten. Confessor Cromwell and Mother Maya, however, treat Gob with respect and an air of reverence because of their spiritual beliefs." End quote. We'll touch more on the relationship the children share with ghouls in a bit, as Fallout 4 and one of Fallout 3's DLCs contain some interesting implications, but for now, let's move on. Returning to the subject of the bomb, as we've already mentioned, both the Confessor and his wife openly discourage the player from disarming it, while subtly encouraging us to outright detonate it. However, their views are a little bit deeper than just what they say. Within the church itself, we can access Confessor Cromwell's personal terminal, which contains a series of journal entries mostly related to his own thoughts on religious matters, which just echo the words of his earlier sermon. Though one entry, titled "Bringing About the Division," seems to elaborate upon his thoughts regarding the device. It reads, quote, "I often ask myself if the time is right for the second division. Here in Adam's blessed village, are we truly ready for his coming? Have I properly prepared my people for the moment in which his great altar cracks open and reveals to us his glory? I am but a man. Who am I to bring these people to glory? Who am I to seek to cause the division?" End quote. So, while they certainly don't want us to disarm their holy relic, the congregation leaders themselves seem hesitant to provoke its detonation. They recognize that the decision ought to be Adam's, that these people's lives are not necessarily theirs to save. Which, I guess, is the closest thing to a nuanced perspective we can expect out of these guys. No matter, while in the city we can occasionally stumble upon an absolutely deranged, though very well-dressed man who introduces himself as Mr. Burke. He claims to work on the behalf of an Alistair Tenpenny, an extremely wealthy businessman who owns a large luxury high-rise just outside the city. Evidently, Burke and Tenpenny have decided that the presence of Megaton is obstructing their condo's view and will offer the player several thousand caps, as well as their building's penthouse suite, if we agree to help them detonate the object at the town square and restore their precious property values. This serves as the Power of Atom's evil ending, and will bestow the player with an unfixable amount of negative karma. Assuming we accept their twisted offer and follow through with the atrocious act, the Atomites will, for obvious reasons, be unavailable for comment. Though afterwards, we can encounter a single, ghoulified survivor of the blast, named Moira Brown, who will claim that the children of Atom must have finally gotten what they wanted all along.
And I guess this is what the Ascension mumbo-jumbo Atom cultists wanted too. So, nice of you to help them like that, I guess. Now, what am I going to do about work? And what's with the weird look? Have I got something on my face?
Now, unfortunately, beyond what we've already discussed, there's not a whole lot more to the Children of Atom we can learn in the vanilla game. Should we instead disarm the bomb, which can easily be done at any point in time with the appropriate science skill, they won't actually notice and will be none the wiser. This leaves us with a tremendous number of questions about the faction, specifically related to their history. Did the Children of Atom organically just spring out of the ground here in Megaton? Or is this group merely a chapter of a much broader faith that could hypothetically span across the wasteland? Well, something resembling an answer to that question may come from a dialogue option with Manya Vargas, the oldest woman in the city, who is at the ripe old age of just 64. Which gives you an idea of lifespans in the city. But I digress. When asked about the settlement's history, she'll say the following.
Well, originally, it started as a hole in the ground. My pappy talked about how his father and the original settlers just hid in this crater. It was enough to keep them safe from the dust storms. When things cooled down and people started wandering into the wastes, some stayed behind. The wanderers started coming back here to trade their stuff. By the time my pappy was born, the town was a full-on trading center. Pappy got rich on the caravan routes and eventually convinced the others to build the walls to hold off the raiders. Some of us wanted to, but the Church of Atom was just getting its start then. We needed their help to build the walls and clear the wreckage. If we'd have tried to move the bomb, they would have refused to help. Besides, a lot of people just wanted to leave it alone. It didn't seem to be hurting anything, and who knows what would happen if we messed with it.
The church was just getting started then. This seems to imply that the Atomites only entered the scene in the last 60 to 90 years, give or take a couple decades, when they helped Manya's father erect the town defenses. However, this quote doesn't necessarily tell us whether the faith organically arose at Megaton, or merely arrived here from somewhere else. Just getting started implies the former, but still leaves enough room for Bethesda to write an entirely separate origin story if they ever see fit. I think this ambiguity was on purpose. Bethesda wanted to make it clear that Megaton is a very holy site for the cult, but still reserves the ability to play with their origin story in future content. Which I think they do. I personally think the Children of Atom are much bigger than just this single city, but we'll get into all of that later. Speaking of future content, while we're just about all done with the vanilla Fallout 3 experience, for now anyways, I'd like to move on and examine the children's role in the game's expansions. One expansion in particular, the Broken Steel DLC. Released in May of 2009, Broken Steel was Fallout 3's third major add-on, and was unique in the sense that, rather than create an entirely new story, it served as a sort of continuation to the game's main questline. You see, normally, at the climax of the game, the lone wanderer is forced to sacrifice their own life in order to successfully activate the Jefferson Memorial Water Purifier, which would provide clean land to the wasteland and end the game afterward. However, Broken Steel provides the player with the ability to survive this event and carry on with the Brotherhood of Steel's war with the Enclave. It also populates the world with a whole assortment of new side quests, which deal with the aftermath of your earlier decisions. Well, one of these new side quests is centered around the emergence of a new chapter of our favorite rad-worshipping church. You see, after completing Project Purity, which is normally the final quest of the game, and reporting back to the Brotherhood HQ, we'll learn that a splinter group of Adamites, calling themselves the Apostles of the Eternal Light, have broken off from the Megaton Church and set up shop in the ruins of Springvale, just a short walk north of the town. While the Apostles do genuinely mean well, their actions can easily be identified as downright evil. You see, after the Lone Wanderer successfully activated Project Purity at the end of the vanilla game, the Brotherhood of Steel began dispatching caravans of free, clean water to distribute across the wasteland. Well, one of the shipments intended for Megaton was accidentally given to these lunatics. Thinking this was some divine gift/test from Adam, the Apostles took the water, irradiated all of it, and then just began passing the stuff out to random locals, not mentioning that they deliberately poisoned the stuff with radiation. The Brotherhood will dispatch the player to investigate and put an end to this strange enterprise. Beginning the quest, Holy Water. Note that if by this point in the game, Megaton has already been destroyed, or if the player chose to sabotage rather than save Project Purity in the vanilla story's final mission, then this quest will simply be unavailable. Upon arriving at the Apostles' monastery, which is simply a refurbished, irradiated cellar beneath a destroyed building, we'll encounter a man named Brother Gerard guarding the entrance, who will say the following.
No, ours is a modest order, but our ranks are growing slowly as others hear our words and are enlightened. As our luminescent mother says, where others walk only in the dying waste, we offer the path of eternal light. And to spread goodwill, we offer this holy water to any and all supplicants. It's full of Adam's light, if that's what you mean. Brighter and warmer than any water I've ever seen before. Blessing of the holy water is overseen by Mother Curie III, our luminescent mother, but her work keeps her busy within the monastery at all times. The Apostles of the Eternal Light were first introduced to the majesty of Adam's glow by the holy teachings of Confessor Cromwell, and we were content to stay in Cromwell's church until Adam gave a vision unto our luminous mother. She learned that Adam did not call for division, that sundering which drives us apart. Adam calls for enlightenment, the warmth which feeds us. For it is only through Adam's supreme and total enlightenment that we may attain salvation in eternal light.
We can ask Brother Gerard to let us into the monastery/cellar he's guarding and speak to their leader. However, unless the player has stage 2 radiation poisoning or higher, the man will refuse, saying that only those blessed by Adam are welcome. From here, we can simply unalive Gerard and steal his keys, pick the lock and break in, or just irradiate ourselves sufficiently and come back to him to open the door for us. The last option is actually probably the easiest. as the actual building we're in is pretty irradiated already. And by activating a switch on a nearby tabernacle connected to a bathtub, where we can just inject ourselves with a dose of radiation in a sort of corrupted baptism. Nonetheless, once inside, we'll begin to realize the full scope of this guild's lunacy. Within the first chamber of the cellar, we'll encounter the faction's leader, a Mother Curie III, delivering an impassioned sermon to a small audience of like 3 people. Her speech is quite a bit shorter than Cromwell's, so I'll just play the whole thing for you.
Long our world has been barren, and our people have become empty. Their hearts have become dry and cold, and thirst consumes the weak and the strong alike. But we can save them, for Adam's bounty has granted us the gifts of mercy and compassion. Oh, my brethren, let us share with them the waters of light. Let them be fulfilled by Adam. Let them know his glow and be truly enlightened. And let them live forever and walk with us in the grace of Adam's glow and never be empty again. May Adam be with you always.
This whole speech seems to be a gigantic euphemism for ghoulifying people. Let them live forever and walk with us in the grace of Adam's glow, to never be empty again. She's describing the condition of ghouls, who, as we know, have radically extended lifespans and don't need to eat nearly as much as normal humans. The apostles of the Holy Light are distributing this water not just to give people a little rad poisoning, but in the hopes that they'll ghoulify them outright. And perhaps the weirdest thing about all this is that the apostles seem to think that they're acting nobly. This sinister objective is reflected in the members of Mother Curie's congregation who we encounter. There's a ghoulified worshipper named Novice in the monastery, who lacks any significant dialogue, but seems to be regarded highly by Brother Gerard and Mother Curie, and we can encounter a couple generic ghoulified wastelanders who occasionally show up and attend services. Sadly, they too also lack dialogue. But I digress. After delivering her sermon, the mother will approach the player, excited to receive another visitor and potential convert, and offer us a little bit more insight on the nature and history of her little operation.
Oh my! I wasn't expecting a pilgrim to our shrine. We're hardly prepared for casual visitors, I'm afraid. You must have made quite an impression on Brother Gerard. He's a lovely boy, but rather strident. I hope he wasn't a bother. Oh, but where are my manners? I'm Mother Curie III, and I lead the Apostles of the Eternal Light. What can I do for you, my dear? It was a gift from Adam. I was meditating right here in Springvale when 4 of his armored angels came to me. When I said I was from Megaton, they gave me barrels of aqua pura and said I should share it with my people. They were very clear on that. Naturally, I understood Adam's message, and so I've been busy blessing this holy water and sharing it with the world. Why, to offer enlightenment to all those who suffer, of course. No more, no less. Adam came to me with a vision, the starving, the ill, the weak, all being made whole and well by receiving the sacrament of Adam's glow. And so, with our holy water, we can make this vision a reality. When exposed to Adam's supreme glow, the ill are reborn in his glowing visage. Those reborn never hunger, never suffer, and never age. All our enlightened brethren need to know is Adam's glow, and they are happy.
So, this silly woman accidentally encountered the Brotherhood's water caravans, misidentified the Brotherhood Knights as armored angels from Adam, and decided she was given a divine mission to irradiate the water and ghoulify the region. Notably, however, Mother Curie actually seems to be quite sincere in her beliefs. As we mentioned, she genuinely means well. In Fallout 3's game files, we can find the actual script that her voice actor was using to deliver her lines. And this script contains notes emphasizing to her voice actor that she's supposed to be sweet, sincere, and honest. Now, we'll return to Mother Curie in just a second, but first, I want to finish our tour of this humble monastery. The first chamber, where we encounter the sermon services, serves as a sort of makeshift chapel, with public benches acting as pews before a small pulpit. In an adjacent room lie some bunk beds, where the congregation presumably sleeps, and finally, in the last chamber of the cellar, down the stairs lies perhaps the most disturbing sights of them all. Here, in the basement, if you will, we can find two docile, I use that word loosely, feral ghouls, one of which will be a glowing one called the Son of Atom. Both are passive and will not attack the player or any of the worshippers, but are clearly very disturbed. The creatures obviously lack any real dialogue, but they make a series of menacing, animalistic grunts, and often violently tremble before the player, seemingly barely restraining their natural violent impulses. The game unfortunately provides us very little lore or insight into what the deal is with these guys. Gerard never mentions them, and Mother Curie barely alludes to their presence in dialogue. However, the Fallout 3 official game guide does contain a few brief paragraphs on the Apostles, which seem to reveal a horrifying truth behind these feral ghouls. Quote, "Also known as the Eternal Light Monastery, this houses a small and insane cult that believe they are the apostles of an eternal light and demand their followers cleanse themselves with a massive dose of radiation. This has the side effect of gradually turning their followers into ghouls. Curie has recently intercepted a water caravan from Scribe Bigsley and is changing the water to match her cosmology. When a human transcends mortality and straddles the ether, they can be seen to be both living in the real and spiritual realm. Mother Curie III firmly believes her own son to have taken the final few steps on his journey. In fact, much of her son's higher functions have disappeared, and only instinct is preventing this confused glowing one from attacking. So, there you have it. Mother Curie, in her religious fervor, has turned her own son into a feral glowing one ghoul, who miraculously is barely restraining itself from acting on its savage instincts. Also, in this room, we can find several barrels of the Brotherhood of Steel's Aqua Pura, with their logo stamped right on it, being irradiated or blessed by the glowing one, and an interesting uranium device the Apostles seem to have set up. Now, that's about all there is to the monastery here. Again, it's a rather small cellar, so let's return to Mother Curie for more of her divine insight. After witnessing the ghouls and radiation apparatus, we can ask the woman what makes her so sure of herself. How does she know that this is truly Adam's will? To which she'll enter into a rather narcissistic tirade, explaining that she's always known great things were in her destiny, and that one day, during service at Megaton's Church of Adam, she had a prophetic dream which inspired her.
I suppose it's a fair question. Ever since I was a girl, I knew I was destined for something special. I always resisted the feeling, me, special. But one day I fell asleep during one of the confessor's sermons, and I had a dream. A dream of the prophet of Adam, ablaze with holy light. He told me of my destiny, of my mission. I was called to service, and I answered.
Now, I promise to stop just dropping all this dialogue on you in a second, but interestingly, once we learn that Curie is indeed from Megaton, the player can tell her of their plans to detonate the atomic device in the city. Unlike Confessor Cromwell and Mother Maya, she'll actually react in horror and beg us not to do so, taking a surprisingly nuanced position on the matter.
No! Oh, no, you mustn't! We left Cromwell's church precisely because we don't believe in the Great Division. Adam calls us to reach enlightenment through becoming one with his glow. We believe in transformation, not destruction. Please, leave the great symbol of Adam alone. Let the confessor preach his misguided message to the heathens. Join us here. Gain enlightenment.
This highlights an interesting doctoral dispute the Apostles have with the main city's church. They reject the ideas of division that Cromwell preaches about. They don't believe that new universes are created with detonations. They don't celebrate destructive explosions. Rather, the Apostles celebrate the transformations that Adam can bring. Interesting. Well, now that we've learned just about all there is to learn about this strange splinter faction, and the reasons why they're sabotaging Megaton's water supply, we'll have a couple of choices in how we proceed with the quest. We can simply start blasting and put an end to the Apostles violently, or, alternatively, pass a speech check, convincing Mother Curie III to see the error of her ways and have her promise to repent, which will result in a major positive karma boost. Afterwards, the Lone Wanderer must simply report back to the Brotherhood of Steel, and the quest will finally be completed. So, we're all done with the Apostles, right? Well, not quite. You see, there's also a sort of alternate ending to the quest, which doesn't reveal anything particularly meaningful about the game's lore, but is interesting enough that I think it's still worth sharing. If at any point in time after beginning the Holy Water quest, you decide to detonate the Megaton projectile, you can return to the Apostles' monastery to find the structure pretty much destroyed, and a now feral, ghoulified Mother Curie laying in the remains. She and her son will be hostile to the player upon detection. Furthermore, also in the area, Brother Gerard can be found. He will be ghoulified, but not feral, and express his satisfaction at finally being blessed by Adam's glow.
Hey there. We came to Megaton to preach of the eternal glow. I saw Adam's holy light. I touched Adam himself. I felt his warm embrace. Mother Curie, she changed. I changed too, but I'm still myself. Poor Mother Curie. She saw the face of Adam, and it drove her mad. I don't know what to do. I think I'll stay here. Pray to Adam. Pray for his guidance. For he has made me of the eternal, the undying. I am his now.
Hilariously, this will technically count as completing the quest, though the Brotherhood scribes will recoil in terror after realizing what you've done. Alrighty. So now we've pretty much gone over all of Fallout 3's Children of Adam content. Just to summarize, the town of Megaton is home to one primary church of the Children of Adam, which may possibly be the original church, or maybe descend from a different group. They are led by a confessor named Cromwell and his wife Maya, who celebrate and preach an idea they refer to as the Division, which is a euphemism for the splitting of an atom and giving your life in a nuclear blast, which they believe will lead to the creation of more universes. Both Cromwell and Mother Maya are opposed to the idea of disarming Megaton's sacred device, but also hesitate to activate it for themselves. At some point in time, Mother Curie III split from this group, intercepted Brotherhood water shipments, and began preaching a new take on this faith, rejecting the ideas of division and instead calling for enlightenment, or the poisoning of oneself with radiation. She is outright opposed to the destruction of Megaton and will beg the Lone Wanderer not to let that happen. Now that we finally got all that down, we're ready to take the next big step in our investigation and explore the Children of Atom as we encounter them in Fallout 4. So, let's repack our Brahmin and make our way to the land that was once the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, I'd like to start this section off by examining an interesting line of dialogue that's said by Piper. If the player has had the rabble-rousing journalist Piper Wright as a companion for a while, and successfully improved her affinity from neutral to friendly, she'll eventually pull the player character aside and ask for a chat. She'll explain that she's beginning to appreciate your company a bit more, and a whole bunch of other mushy stuff that's beyond the scope of this video, but will briefly allude to nearly being executed once. You can catch this and ask her to elaborate, to which she'll tell the following story.
I suppose so.
Hey, I'm not one to judge. Honestly, it's just nice to not be doing it alone for a change. In my line of work, things tend to get pretty hairy. I've been shot at, poisoned, nearly executed. Heck, until recently they called the lockup in Diamond City the Piper Suite. Anything for a story, I suppose.
Seems that execution didn't quite take, huh?
Thank God. I'd been working on this story about irradiated drinking water in Bunker Hill. I traced the water back to its source through these old sewer tunnels, and what do I find? The Children of Atom, setting up like they own the place. Unfortunately, they found me just as quick. Turns out they were not fond of reporters. So, to atone for my trespassing, they decided to make a sacrifice to Atom. Me. Kneeling there, about to get the boot into this huge sewer pipe, when suddenly I blurt out, "Atom! He reveals himself!" And they buy it. They pull me back from the ledge, and then gave me their induction ceremony. You are looking at an official acolyte of Atom. Took me a couple more days before I managed to sneak away, get Bunker Hill security to finally clean the place up.
This is an interesting bit of dialogue that sort of helps set the tone for how many of the Atomites in the Commonwealth treat outsiders. Unlike their Capital Wasteland counterparts, most of the Children of Atom in Fallout 4 are openly hostile to non-members, and will become aggressive upon detection. Piper's story makes it unclear whether the Atomites were deliberately irradiating Bunker Hill's water supply, or just attracted to the source of whatever was doing the irradiating. And unfortunately, there's nothing else in the game we can find about this story, as evidently Bunker Hill's security cleaned up the situation. The closest place with a Children of Atom presence to Bunker Hill is a unique location known as Crater House on the game's northeastern coast, just a short walk away from Dunwich Borers. Here we'll encounter a large, very violent atomic congregation, who have built their camp in the center of a crashed bomber. The aircraft must have been carrying some nuclear components, because the water around the crater maintains a greenish-yellow sort of hue, and is heavily irradiated, producing a beautiful glow at night. This whole setting calls back to Megaton in a way, a settlement that, too, was built in the crater of an old winged vehicle. Perhaps the Children of Atom are trying to build a new Megaton here, or something, or maybe it's just a coincidence. Unfortunately, we can't really ask anyone for details, as the folks here will fire first and ask questions later. Remarkably, the members here seem to be demonstrating an almost supernatural resistance to the radiation around them. The central pool here, where many of the men worship, can produce dozens of rads a second, yet they all seem unfazed. Their appearances, however, may tell a somewhat different story. Most of the cultists seem to be experiencing hair loss, have wrinkly, scarred skin, and saggy eyes. So perhaps it's not total immunity that they're experiencing, but just an enhanced degree of resistance that prevents them from passing away, but not from suffering some cosmetic effects. Notably, these Adamites are much better equipped than any we've encountered so far. They're each armed with gamma radiation blasters and various boom-inducing devices. Speaking of them in combat, much of the radiant dialogue that these Adamites exclaim during their battles seem to be direct quotes from Confessor Cromwell's earlier sermon in Megaton. Take a listen.
He is coming with the clouds, and every eye shall be blind with his glory. Every ear shall be stricken deaf to hear the thunder of his voice.
He is coming with the clouds!
Every eye shall be blind to his glory.
Every ear shall be stricken deaf to hear the thunder of his voice.
Now, a lot of people have taken these dialogue lines, along with the way Crater House's layout seems to invoke Megaton, as proof that this group must directly descend from Megaton's church. Which is a reasonable conclusion and seems very likely. I'd put my money on it. But it's also possible that Cromwell's sermon wasn't entirely his own original work. You see, it's possible that Cromwell's speech was just quoting from some important Children of Adam scripture or holy book that we've just never seen. Like, Christian priests will often give sermons containing direct verses from the Bible. Maybe the confessor in Megaton was doing something similar, and rather than directly invoking Cromwell, the Fallout 4 Children of Adam are really quoting the scripture that he borrowed from. We should keep our eyes out for a source text they could both be drawing from. But I digress. Just a short walk down the road from Crater House lies Kingsport Lighthouse, another Adamite site which seems to be inhabited by the same congregation. The folks here are equally hostile to outsiders and use the same combat dialogue. Fun fact, the name Kingsport seems to be a reference to a fictional H.P. Lovecraft town of the same name. Indeed, Kingsport was featured as the, or a setting of several of Lovecraft's horror stories from the 1920s. He describes the location as a poorly populated seaside town with a strange connection to the occult. We'll come back around to the Lovecraftian themes of this location and the Children of Adam more broadly later on in the video, though for now, let's just stay with the more terrestrial stuff. Notably, the Adamites seem to have taken full advantage of this location's existing infrastructure, creatively placing a glowing one feral ghoul in the lighthouse's lantern pane, along with the bodies of a few unnamed wastelanders for the creature to munch on. This unorthodox strategy is working like a charm, as the lighthouse remains bright and visible from extraordinary distances at nighttime. Within the worker house lie more unlucky wastelander corpses, but also a terminal containing the two following entries. The first is known as the Beacon. Quote, "We have been charged by our brothers and sisters at the crater to lead others to bask in the glow. We have brought in those strong with Adam's blessing to provide a beacon at the top of this tower. Their light shall draw the believers. The faithful should pray at the tower, then continue their pilgrimage to the crater. Praise be to Atom." The next is titled Heretics. It reads, "It would seem that the beacon has also drawn heretics who must be shown the glory of Adam." Those who will not join us must be cleansed, then we may use them to feed the blessed in the tower. All glory to Atom. So, the folks at Crater House took over Kingsport specifically to advertise their little holy site, so to speak, to others. Like moths to light, their beacon has also attracted a number of non-believers, who, much like the player, they seek to remove from the game, both figuratively and literally. Now, what I'm about to say is far from confirmed, but some players have suggested that the beacon may specifically be drawing in folks from the sea, as there is a docked vessel at the pier beneath the lighthouse, where several children of Atom will spawn in. There is also a separate, seemingly fresh and seaworthy rowboat on the beach, where more Atomites will spawn. This could just be how Bethesda designed the location for the most entertaining combat sequence, but given that this is a lighthouse, and that we know the Atomites are capable of ocean travel, given their presence on Far Harbor, which we'll discuss later, that possibility remains open. Now, here's where things get kinda fun. A look in Fallout 4's creation kit reveals that this Kingsport terminal was originally going to have several additional entries. These now removed documents would have essentially served as a sort of scripture for the children of Atom, that tremendously elaborated upon their beliefs in quite a bit of detail, specifically in relation to their whole idea of division and rebirth. The cut entries are quite long, but I think it's worth reading them in full, as they're pretty significant. Should only take a minute or two, but if you'd like to skip, the timecode will be in the description. The Great Division, Part 1. In the beginning, Atom created the first division of light from darkness, and the name of the first is Fission. It is that which encompass the whole kingdom of Atom, wherein there is the glow, and the stars cast his glow upon the firmament, and through it creatures were divided from the earth, and made with eyes to perceive his holy glory. And for a time the great division continued, and created all manner of creature, which tested themselves to be worthy of Atom. This seems to be a euphemism for evolution or even Genesis, depending on the way you look at this. There are some really strong, almost uncanny similarities between how this is worded and, like, the Abrahamic book of Genesis. So perhaps the children of Atom uncovered some real-life religious scripture and are meshing that together with their beliefs, but I digress. Let's continue. The Great Division, Part 2. Thus came forth man, who had the potential to understand the true form of Atom. But man was weak and swayed by false gods, sought to enslave Atom by wrapping his mortal gifts in the coils of a great copper worm. But he and his prophets were not swayed, and through them Atom's bonds were broken, and his trumpet soundeth as the breaking of the world. And where his shackles were loosed, a tree of light grew upon the earth, and in its blooming cast forth a cleansing fire. The faithful knew that they still had his love, for where the tree bloomed, his seal was placed upon the earth, wherein they might drink the waters of the glow. Still, the wicked did not believe, and so stars of heaven fell upon the earth, carried by winged chariots, as his trumpet sounded for 40 days. Thus the land was cleansed, and a second great division began. But as with the worm, the unbelievers hid below the earth from the eye of Atom, trapped in their ignorance. Today he has delivered new prophets, and said unto them, I have sent forth thy prisoners out of the pit, wherein there is no water of the glow, and you shall wield the arrow of my judgment upon them. Pity not the wailing of heretics, for their tears shall be dried in the flames, and their flesh shall be consumed away while they stand upon their feet in the division, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes to behold the glory of Atom. And their tongue shall consume away in their mouth to better speak his name, and so shall you do my works upon the earth." End quote. Now, mind you, all of these entries were removed from the game for a reason, so they by no means can be considered canon. However, this gives us a good idea of how Bethesda's writers explained the Adamite religion at one point in time. And the whole thing just so strongly parallels the Abrahamic faiths. You know, they use fission as a metaphor for the Big Bang, for let there be light. They describe the creation of man and man's fall from grace in this really Abrahamic kind of way. They see the Great War as a consequence of mankind foolishly trying to enslave their God, which, hey, isn't entirely off the mark, let's be honest here. Putting this beautiful piece of cut scripture aside, though, but speaking of other cut content, don't worry, we'll get back to the real game in a second. There also exists an unused NPC in the game files, which would have spawned in at this Kingsport location, named Confessor Adalia. Now, Confessor Adalia has no unique dialogue or packages attached to her NPC file. And when spawned in the game through the console, she'll simply be aggressive and use generic Adamite combat phrases. However, it's very possible that Bethesda at one point in time had planned much more for this character. Given the fact that she's the only child of Adam in the Commonwealth, referred to as Confessor, she must have occupied some sort of leadership position, at least among this northeastern coast congregation. Furthermore, she seems remarkably untouched by radiation compared to most of her peers. Her skin seems brighter, and her hair seems healthier than many pre-war folks even. This could suggest some uniquely strong radiation immunity, or that she had access to some kind of massive Radex supply or similar technology. Just because we can't find any dialogue or quest packages tied to her in the files, doesn't mean that they never existed. A tremendous amount of the content removed from the game was also scrubbed from the creation kit before launch. Perhaps that's what happened here. Maybe Confessor Adalia and those removed pieces of scripture were meant to be a part of a much larger plot that never came together. Or perhaps they were merely half-baked ideas that were never seriously pursued in the first place. But I digress. Aside from Miss Adalia, we can also find several reference markers and location files in the creation kit related to what must have been a deleted Church of Adam that would have appeared in Diamond City. Unfortunately, we don't know much about what this building would have looked like or who it would have been populated by, as all we can find are the location markers and IDs that would have been used, nothing else. So either Diamond City's Church of Adam was cut very early in the development, or the developers were very careful to scrub the creation kit of almost all of its data. But with that said, let's head back into reality, and get back to exploring the content that actually made it into the game. Aside from Kingsport and Crater House, there's only one other significant Adamite camp in the game. The Crater of Adam, located in the southwestern corner of the map, in the deepest ends of the glowing sea. I could describe this place myself, but the official game guide puts the words to better use. Ground zero for the nuclear detonation, which overtook Boston and the surrounding area in 2077. This area is still heavily irradiated with the fallout from the centuries-old explosion. Strangely, however, it has garnered the attention of a few individuals. A group calling themselves the Children of Atom have made a pilgrimage to the site and now live there, somehow unaffected by the radiation itself. The group, a peaceful cult dedicated to the worship of radiation and revering the act of splitting the atom, have set up within it intent to spread the word of Atom's divine glow and their creation myth to all the people of the Commonwealth. led by a calm yet firm woman named Isolde, they encourage and aid in any attempt to detonate a nuclear weapon, as they consider this to be how new universes are created, but are otherwise, for the most part, unwilling to get into any significant conflict in the Commonwealth. Indeed, unlike the other rad worshippers we've encountered thus far, the congregation here is friendly to the player, and will invite us to trade and worship alongside them. This difference in demeanor makes you wonder just how associated these guys are with the more aggressive cultists we encountered up north. Are they working together in constant communication and coordination, taking directions from the same leadership? Or are they perhaps entirely separate denominations of the same faith, like what we saw with the Apostles of the Holy Light and their contradictions with the Megaton Church? Aside from their temperament, the structure of this camp is also worth taking stock of. Beyond the main aluminum buildings being used, we can find several abandoned and dilapidated structures along the perimeter of the crater, possibly implying that the children of Adam have been here for a while. At the center of the crater, lying in an irradiated pool, is what seems to be a temple structure of sorts, though inside is a rather random collection of miscellaneous items, such as kids' toys and beverages. There's also a radio, which may be used for communication, though all it seems to get is static. While passive, most of the folks here are unresponsive to attempted interactions, merely responding with vague quotes about Adam's division and the meaning of their prayer. The leader of this group, however, a woman known as Mother Isolde, will be a little bit more engaging with the player, and direct us to some nearby locations, and explain the general holiness of this place.
Tell me more about Adam, if you would.
Adam gave birth to this world and all worlds, and within this world he gave us the promise of infinite rebirth. We are, all of us, universes without count, waiting for the division to bring them all into being. We spread Adam's word and his gifts to those throughout the Commonwealth. They will see the truth of Adam's glow.
Notably, when close to Isolde, the player will suddenly cease from taking radiation damage. This, I feel, is an insane and incredibly overlooked detail that I don't think anyone else has discussed. Not only is this woman and her followers dramatically more resilient to the effects of Raz than the layman, but they, or Isolde at least, seem to have some sort of field that protects those around her too. This effect is totally unique to her. She's the only NPC in the vanilla game who does this, and I can't figure out for the life of me why. It's possible Bethesda gave her this effect as a simple gameplay decision, to make meeting her less tedious. Like, maybe they didn't want the player to be worried about Rads when speaking to her. But then, if that was the case, why not do that for any of the other Glowing Sea NPCs? We still take rad damage when speaking to our companions or Virgil out here, so this appears to be deliberately unique to Isolde. Fallout 4 in general really hits home the Children of Adam's radiation-resisting powers. I mean, sure, back in 3, Cromwell spent his days preaching outside a slightly radioactive shrine, and the Apostles of the Holy Light were constantly around irradiated objects. But they were being exposed to more moderate dosages. You know, 3 rads here, maybe 10 there. Remarkable, but still within the realm of, I don't know, loose believability. Here in the Glowing Sea, however, these people are absorbing enough radiation to expire them every few minutes. So, what gives? Is Adam actually real? Has he genuinely blessed these people? Or could there be a less supernatural explanation at play? Well, interestingly enough, we do know of at least one example in the post-Bethesda Fallout universe of a person who was born with a natural resistance to radiation. Though, we have to turn back the clock a bit. In 2009, Fallout 3 received its second major add-on, the Pit, which sent the lone wanderer to an industrial raider metropolis that was once known as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The raiders there were led by an ex-Brotherhood of Steel paladin who called himself Ishmael Ashur. He was allegedly left behind by his faction after a previous excursion, but successfully leveraged his technical know-how and leadership prowess to unite the various warring tribes and build something resembling a functioning government, albeit a government that depended on several thousand involuntary employees, if you catch my meaning, to work its mines and build its defenses. Anyway, just prior to the player's arrival at the pit, Ishmael and his wife, a Dr. Sandra Kundanica, recently gave birth to a baby girl named Marie, who they rapidly discovered is immune to all forms of radiation poisoning and even ghoulification. Here's how the mother, Dr. Kundanica, explains it.
Believe it or not, she's both. My daughter appears to have a naturally acquired immunity to any form of mutation. Basically, she won't turn into one of the trogs, or a ghoul or anything else, and by studying her, we can keep that from happening to others too. Oh no, these tests are perfectly safe. In fact, between the crib and her uncanny health, she's probably the safest child in the world. Asher and I would never risk her health, and if that means it takes longer to develop a full cure, then, well, everyone else can wait.
The couple believe that by analyzing Marie's biology, they might be able to develop something resembling a cure to all radiation-borne illnesses. Though, unfortunately, they need more time. The newborn is just too fragile to risk placing under serious tests until she gets older. The Pit's storyline revolves around a struggle for possession of the baby, as a faction of rebelling slaves seeks to take the child and use it to help leverage for their freedom, and possibly make a cure on their own, though it's implied that they have no idea what they're doing. The player can choose to either protect baby Marie and keep her with her family, or steal the child and give it to the rebels. Nonetheless, whatever decision we take, not much more is revealed about the science behind what's going on, nor will a cure be developed at any point during our playthrough, as again, more time is needed. But this whole dramatic episode does confirm the fact that at least some people are born in the wasteland with an immunity to rads, perhaps as a consequence of some rare, random genetic mutation, or maybe something prenatal in development, something more environmental. Still, though, the Pit DLC really hits home how rare this condition is. It seems very unlikely that you would be able to build these massive 20+ groups of people who all happen to share in it. We'll have more to say about the nature of this strange development later in the video, but for now, let's continue our examination of Fallout 4. Specifically, let's head on over to the island of Far Harbor, where the next pieces of our puzzle lie. While we initially arrive on the island with the purpose of helping Nick Valentine conduct a missing person investigation, we are quickly sucked into a much grander plot. You see, as far back as anyone can remember, Far Harbor has been plagued by a mysterious radioactive fog that occasionally overtakes the island and devastates the locals. Brief exposure to this bizarre gas is said to cause insanity, and long-term interaction with it can result in one expiring from the radiation content alone. To make matters worse, a number of mutants and beasts seem to thrive under the cloud's protection and multiply in greater numbers when it's around, bringing an added danger. The fog comes and goes with time, sometimes remaining or being absent for years on end. However, upon our arrival, it's consumed nearly the entire island, save for a small pier on the northern corner, where a tiny little settlement makes its final stand. The settlers keep the fog and its creatures at bay, thanks to an extensive series of fortifications and these great fog condenser machines, which essentially act as super dehumidifiers, but it's barely enough. The fog is getting closer and encroaching on them. Aside from the townsfolk at the pier, there are two other major factions driving this narrative. The first being a small synth refugee colony, which has taken over the island's observatory. They are led by a uniquely intelligent model named Dima, who really just wants everyone to get along and has even been helping those settlers acquire fog condensers, though he's also shown to be a little naive and nihilistic. The other group, being the real stars of our show, are the Children of Atom. According to dialogue with the Harbormen or the Atomites themselves, this rad cult arrived on the island around a decade or so, and began worshipping the fog, calling it Atom's Holy Veil. When they originally arrived, the fog was much less intense than it is now. It was barely a threat, and the wacky group was welcomed by the local settlers. However, as the years went on, the church grew in numbers, and the fog grew across the island. Eventually, the townsfolk began blaming the new faith for the sudden reencroachment of their terrible weather, and expelled them from the harbor. The Atomites eventually set up shop in an abandoned nuclear submarine base, now known as the Nucleus, where they continue their worship to this very day. Just prior to our showing up, relations between the children and their old neighbors have gone from bad to even worse. The old leader of the congregation, a man known as Confessor Martin, mysteriously disappeared and has been replaced by a zealous, militant, and aggressive man named Tectus, who seeks revenge on the Harbormen for a series of perceived slights. It's against this complicated political backdrop that the sole survivor enters the picture, and the choices we make will ultimately determine the future of this fragile little isle. Far Harbor is definitely one of the most player-driven stories Bethesda has told. You can complete the story siding with any of the three major factions, and each of the factions has a bunch of separate endings depending on what you decide to do. But for the purposes of this video, we're obviously going to focus on the player's potential interactions with the Atomites, because boy, is there a lot to say about these guys. At any point after our arrival, we can head on over to the Nucleus, the Children of Atom's chapel. Upon approaching the facility, we'll witness the execution of a member for supposed disobedience, which foreshadows the cruelty that this group is capable of. We can speak to the man guarding the gate, a certain Grand Zealot Richter, and ask for permission to enter, to which he'll refuse, explaining that entry into Atom's sacred temple is reserved for his followers. However, if we'd like to take the initiation ritual and perhaps become one of said worshippers, he'd be happy to welcome us in after. This begins the quest, Visions in the Fog, and it's one of the most bizarre and supernatural experiences offered by the Fallout universe. The Zealot will instruct the sole survivor to seek out a nearby holy spring and drink from it, and report back when we're done. This sacred spring, as it turns out, was clearly some sort of pre-war toxic waste dump given the various yellow barrels all around, but orders are orders. And upon taking a sip from the baths, something remarkable will happen. The player will enter into a sort of hallucinogenic state, and a mysterious silhouette, simply named Ghostly Figure, will appear on a cliffside and instruct us to follow her. We'll begin walking throughout the island following this shade's path. While we can approach the feminine character, we can't initiate dialogue.
Excuse me.
Interacting with her is pointless, and she's immune to any attacks. Oddly enough, as we give chase, we'll encounter several normally aggressive mutants, such as gulpers and fog crawlers, but they'll be passive to us while in our trance, completely ignoring our approach. The ghostly character also has a greenish, glowing hue around her, perhaps not unlike the glow that the Apostles of the Holy Light claimed to see around our player when we were sufficiently irradiated. But that's just an idea. Eventually, this Fog Mother will lead us to a small, ghoul-infested abandoned building called the Children of Adam Shrine. In front of the building will be a note on the ground titled Scrawled Note. It bizarrely reads, quote, "From Atom Shrine we enter. With Atom decipher name. From Atom claim entry." The building's interior will consist of a large, locked cage, controlled by a password-protected terminal. The password can be found scrawled onto a locker beside a periodic table. It lists the elements molybdenum, thorium, and erbium, spelling out the word mother, and the corresponding elemental numbers serve as the password that we're looking for. Now, there's something wrong about this periodic table and the elements listed, but we'll get there later. For now, let's just play along with the quest. Next, simply enter the password into the terminal and presto, the doors will be unlocked, and inside will be a wooden figure, which the game calls a mother icon, as well as a note, which says, "To his shrine retreat. Upon Atom think. Know his servants watch." The wooden statuette represents a sort of feminine character with what appear to be greenish glowing eyes. It kinda reminds me of the ancient Venus figurines, which are often dug up at archaeological sites, particularly in Siberia and Europe, but it doesn't seem to be based off of any one of them in particular, and similarities may just be coincidence. Furthermore, within this room, on the ground next to the desk is a stealth boy, which may give us a clue as to what's going on with the silhouette. Regardless, after we've collected the figurine, our hallucinogenic experience will come to an end, and the quest marker will send us to report back to Zealot Richter, who will react with astonishment when we recount our story.
It was like a nightmare. Haunting whispers, shadowy creatures, and the ghost of a woman covered in mist.
Adam above. You really did see her. The mother of the fog. The mother is a messenger from Adam. Acts as a guide to those important to his plans and the future of this family. She's the one who led the first of us to this place. And if she revealed herself to you, then I'd say the path he's laying for you is clear. If you are prepared to take the next step, then I believe there is a place for you among Adam's children.
We are now welcome in the nucleus, and on our way to being considered full Adamites ourselves. However, we can stop and ask Richter a few more questions regarding our experience, and the Fog Mother. His answers are rather enlightening.
So, what exactly happened to me at the spring?
Seems Adam granted you a vision. Only those deemed worthy of joining the children have them, and live. But for some rare souls, he sends more. A messenger. Or in your case, the mother.
So, was the mother real?
Most people believe she's some sort of spirit, a creature of the wilds, though a few claim she's just an old hermit. Regardless, our family wouldn't be here without her. If she figured in your vision, well, there are few signs clear you're meant to be one of us.
So, the Children of Adam have been using this spring as a sort of test for new initiates. Those who drink from it and survive are considered to be Adam's chosen, and a very lucky few, including ourselves, are granted a more intimate revelation from this Mother of the Fog. This very likely could be an accidental selection system, wherein those who do not possess the unique genetic or environmental gift of radiation immunity are just naturally filtered out of the potential recruit pool. As a matter of fact, there's this companion that Far Harbor introduces named Old Longfellow, whom, if we get to a high enough affinity, will reveal to the player that he was once engaged to a woman and they were even expecting a child, until she got enthralled by the actions of the children of Adam and succumbed to a similar radiation poisoning herself.
Long time ago, when I was a young man, I had a sweetheart. Hannah was her name. And we planned to get married, raise a family and all that. Well, we had a place out in the fog we used to meet so we could be alone. Damn children of Adam jumped us. They took her and left me for dead. Took 2 months to recover from my injuries. By then, it was too late. They'd warped her mind and turned her into their ways. It was only later I learned she was carrying our child. Of course, the baby didn't stand a chance with all that radiation. Adam's will, she called it. Anyway, she died a few years later. Trappers got her. Or so them lunatics said. I guess that was Adam's will, too.
Sad boy hour aside, upon entering the nucleus, we'll be instructed to speak to this congregation's leader, a man calling himself High Confessor Tectus, who sits on this makeshift throne in the docked submarine. We'll be able to tell the man about our encounter with the mother, and present him with the figurine as proof. He'll respond with excitement and enthusiasm, promising that Adam has clearly reserved a great destiny for the player. Though, there's also a twinkle of cynicism in his tone.
I found this icon. The Grand Zealot said you'd be interested in seeing it.
Is that the mother? So the whispers were true. You saw the mother of the fog. Many of Adam's children spend their whole lives wishing for such a boon. It would seem he expects great things from you, child, as will I. Now, was there anything else?
What can you tell me about the Mother of the Fog?
The Mother is one of Adam's most revered messengers. Many years ago, when we were driven from Far Harbor, it was she who guided us through the wilds to this sanctuary. We might all have been lost if it wasn't for her. You should be honored she found you so interesting.
Now, what will also become clear during this initial dialogue is that this man is a psycho. Tectus gives off very sinister vibes, and almost as soon as he meets you, he'll start ranting about how much he hates the heretic harbormen back at the settlement. He seems to despise non-believers more than he actually loves Adam.
Adam's chosen?
This place, the nucleus, the island, Adam has claimed it all. For us, his chosen. All but one blasted corner. You've been to Far Harbor, yes? Seen its barriers against Adam's holy fog? Its citizens' blasphemous refusal to vacate what is clearly his domain? What would you do with such a place?
Is Far Harbor really that bad?
Yes, brother, they are. For years, my predecessor begged for peace, while Far Harbor fortified their bastion of heresy. We tried to help them, to bring them Adam's light. Many of our brethren ended up dying for it. But now that I am High Confessor, that time is over. All Adam's foes, whether Far Harbor cowering behind their precious condensers, or that ancient robot hiding away his memories within our very home, they will come to recognize Adam as the sole master of this island. But it is only through unity that we can succeed. Adam requires devotion from all his children. Embrace that, and you will do well here. Now, was there anything you required?
It's very spooky, and it's also subtly hinted that the Confessor may have earned his title through illegitimate means. You see, Tectus only became the High Confessor just a couple months prior to the player's arrival on the island. Apparently, the previous leader, a High Confessor named Martin, who was apparently an elderly and peace-loving man, mysteriously disappeared not long ago. And Tectus stepped up, you can almost hear the air quotes I'm doing, to fill the void and put the children on a much more belligerent path. Though we do later find out that he is innocent of this alleged crime. Nonetheless, after we've gotten our introductions with everyone squared away, Tectus and the children will offer the sole survivor a series of miscellaneous quests, mostly related to rooting out dissent among the faithful, as a means of proving our own loyalty and initiating ourselves with the faction. Sadly, though, we never again encounter the Mother of the Fog. Regardless of the choices we make and whether or not we even decide to stay with the Adamites, that strange glowing silhouette won't manifest any further. Still though, depending on how exactly we proceed, we can encounter traces of her. There's this unmarked location in a drainage pipe just west of the nucleus itself, where we can come across what appears to have been a hideout of sorts for Confessor Martin, the old leader of the children who mysteriously disappeared. In this hideaway, we find a series of notes and holotapes left behind by Martin, which suggest that in his final days, he was beginning to lose faith in his own ability to lead. He felt that his congregation was growing too violent, too reckless, too angry. And while he had always worked hard to keep everyone peaceful, Martin had finally come to realize that his hold was slipping, and there was little more that he could do. So, the elderly man one day just left. In a note on a table, he writes, "Atom above, I've lost them. Tectus screams for blood and the children cheer. I beg for civility and they whisper traitor behind my back. I'm left to wonder what I might have done to deserve you taking them away from me. But in the back of my mind, I know. Waning faith is an untended fire. Fail to care for it and it cannot be rekindled. Thus here I am, thinking on embers, trying to summon the courage to do what I know I have put off for too long. So, I shall step out that door, and when I do, my new life begins anew. But for the first time, O Radiant One, its path is out of your hands." Confessor Martin's whole story really represents a tremendous tragedy in the Fallout universe. And ultimately, the game leaves his fate up in the air. We never find out what happened to him, though the withered feral ghoul that lies outside of his hideaway provides an ominous suggestion. The real reason I bring this whole thing up, however, is because within his hideaway, Martin left behind another Mother of the Fog figurine, implying he too shared an intimate connection with the creature. It's unclear exactly how the old confessor came upon this object, though the easiest assumption to make is that he once had a similar vision to our own. Notably, this is the only other Fog Mother statuette we can find in the game. No others exist. However, we're still not done investigating this shade. Speaking of unmarked locations, nearby Braddock Cove, a large abandoned neighborhood on the eastern banks of the island, we can encounter an interesting little place. In one of the homes, nestled within the attic, is this bizarre sight. A small hideout consisting of a table, a sleeping bag, some Children of Atom tapestry, and a mannequin lie ominously undisturbed amongst an assortment of notes and stealth boys. The notes are written in the same disorganized, esoteric style as our previous Mother of the Fog messages. They're pretty short, so I'll just read them in order. The first is titled, "A Vengeful Creature," and it reads, a vengeful creature drives the good confessor away, and to question his purpose. The next says, the children trapped in a crumbling home, mother wants to end their pain. The third goes, to Adam's Island, a stranger arrives. A new child we spy? ? The final note, located under the table next to the Stealth Boys, says, from Atom we find a safer way to watch. Gifts never cease. This place was clearly being used as a hideout of sorts for the Mother of the Fog. And, as if there's any doubt, the notes are actually referred to as Mother of the Fog notes by the game files. She seems to be describing the basic events of the story, with the vengeful creature being Tectus driving away the good confessor Martin, and the author being desperate for a solution, before a stranger, being us, arrives on the island. The presence of the Stealth Boys also suggests a more terrestrial explanation may be behind the Mother after all. She very easily could be using these devices to maneuver unseen around the island. And perhaps the rads we absorbed through the spring just, temporarily allowed us to see somewhat past the illusion during our initiation. Or maybe she didn't have the Stealth Boy enabled at all. Several of the creatures we encounter on our walk also have the same effect, so maybe that's just what the radiation did to our eyes. Furthermore, the Mother's Stealth Boy use may provide an explanation to her rather neurotic and disorganized writing style. You see, Stealth Boy addiction is actually a documented and well-understood illness that's been known to cause symptoms of insanity in the Fallout universe. In Fallout New Vegas, there existed a settlement called Jacobstown in the far northwestern corner of the map. Jacobstown served as a sort of super mutant refuge, where mutants who had grown sick of violence and disillusioned with their barbaric lifestyle had come to start anew. Interestingly, many of these super mutant residents were recovering Stealth Boy addicts known as Nightkin, who apparently, thanks to a lifetime of Stealth Boy abuse, had begun developing severe psychological issues. Schizophrenia is evidently particularly common.
Nightkin suffers schizophrenia from the Stealth Boys they're always using. One of the reasons I settled Jacobstown was so they could be cured. While they're in town, the Nightkin aren't allowed to have Stealth Boys so their craziness doesn't get worse. Trouble is, the Nightkin don't like being visible either. They don't take being exposed too well.
The Stealth Boys we use have cumulative adverse effects on our minds. Jacobstown was supposed to be a sanctuary, a place to find a cure. Instead, we wait and wait. I'm sick of waiting.
The Nightkin we'd encounter would all be peaceful, but also clearly very disturbed. They could be overheard complaining about voices, and while they would never get violent, some of their passive remarks to the player are quite aggressive and hostile. Long story short, during our time in Jacobstown, we could actually help a scientist find a cure for the illness through completing a sort of fetch quest and subsequent series of speech and science checks, but that's for another video. Suffice to say, if the Mother of the Fog has been exposing herself to chronic Stealth Boy radiation, she's almost certainly driven herself mad as well, which would explain all of the notes we find. Even so, there are elements to the story which can't so easily be explained. Alright, now pause right here. A bit of a disclaimer is in order before we go any further. So, when we initially started our investigation of the Children of Adam, maybe a month or 3 ago, we already had a pretty good idea of what we were going to do, and our objective was to identify more scientific, terrestrial explanations behind everything. You know, we were aiming to explain all the supernatural stuff away without being supernatural, and we assumed that would be pretty easy to do. I mean, yeah, sure, the Mother of the Fog is a little bit wooey, but we already knew about the stealth boys and stuff. We thought it was very clear-cut. However, as we got deeper and deeper into our investigation, we began to identify several connections, which we didn't expect, to more genuine supernatural phenomenon in the Fallout universe, if that makes any sense. You see, in the franchise, there exists this company called Dunwich Borers LLC. Now, a few months ago, we already uploaded an extensive investigation on this faction and really got into the weeds in good detail. I would highly encourage you to watch that video before going any further with this one, as that'll provide all the context you need for this to make even more sense. But if not, basically, the spark notes are that Dunwich Borers LLC was this pre-war company that was secretly obsessed with the occult. Their owners, the Dunwich brothers, worshipped this creature called Ugg-Qualtoth. Anyway, we don't understand a whole lot about Ugg-Qualtoth or the occult forces behind everything. For a long time, we all just kind of thought it was a red herring by Bethesda, an excuse to make Lovecraft references in their games, but the story's gotten a little bit deeper. What we do know is that these occult Dunwich forces, these eldritch gods in which they are serving, do appreciate human sacrifices, and they have a weird connection to radiation and even ghoulification. In Fallout 3, there was a location called the Dunwich Building in the southwestern corner of the map. This was apparently the Dunwich corporate headquarters before the war, and the location in the game kinda served the purpose of a haunted house, if you will. The lighting was turned down dramatically, there were ghouls all over the place that kinda spawned in like pop-ups meant to scare the player. It was a neat little gimmick. Well, while we were in there, we could find these holotapes all over the place, left behind by a man named Jamie, who apparently came to the Dunwich building in search of his father. In the first holotapes we find, Jamie sounds like a perfectly normal, reasonable man with a good head on his shoulders. But as we get deeper and deeper into the building, Jamie starts sounding weirder and weirder, and by the end of it all, he's turned into a ghoul in the holotapes. He's completely ghoulified. And beneath the Dunwich building, we could find him alongside several dozen other ghouls worshipping at this strange obelisk. It was very bizarre. Now, when I originally uploaded that Dunwich video a few months ago, I didn't dwell too much on the fact that, this Jamie guy had essentially ghoulified. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to the fact that this location was inherently associated with radiation and ghoulification. As a matter of fact, the obelisk down here irradiates the player in this weird way. It's very strange. Anyway, going forward, in Fallout 4, there of course existed another location, called Dunwich Borers, which was literally, I kid you not, just a few feet away from Crater House and Kingsport Lighthouse, where the Children of Atom have set up shop. Anyway, this place was pretty much a pre-war quarry used by the Dunwich Company. Their cover story was that they were using the quarry to extract important resources like marble and stuff, but what they were really doing was trying to dig down to some sort of ancient occult site, and they were performing human sacrifices here consistently. By the time we get to it, the location is occupied by raiders, but the raiders are kinda being driven mad by whatever spirits inhabit this place. It's a really fun site to visit. Anyway, as we get to the very bottom of this mine, we have this sort of pre-war hallucination/vision, where we witness Dunwich executives performing human sacrifices within this ancient temple complex. What's interesting, and again, something I overlooked at the time, is that once this hallucination concludes, all of the people who we just saw get sacrificed will attack the player as feral ghouls. Didn't these people just get yeeted? How are they back and reanimated as ferals? Furthermore, we're so deep down, the Dunwich Quarry goes down it's gotta be like 1,000 feet or something. You would think this area is like shielded from radiation emissions, right? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, unless Bethesda just wanted to make the area more spooky, right? You know, ghouls are kind of the default, like, zombie-like thing that Bethesda puts when they want to scare you, so maybe it was just a development decision, but I digress. Furthermore, also after the hallucination ends, this sort of pool will open up in the center of the temple, which we can swim down to find another little temple flooded underwater, where our reward for the dungeon, a unique blade called Krimva's Tooth, lies, flanked by 2 mini nukes next to it. The shrine itself also produces a not insignificant amount of radiation. Though Bethesda may mean to suggest this is coming from the mini nukes, it's not entirely obvious. But clearly, for whatever reason, these devices are associated with worship of Ugg-Qual'Toth. As a matter of fact, there's 2 other mini nukes hidden away in Dunwich borders, stashed in dark corners. It's not obvious if these were brought down by the Dunwich Company or by the raiders themselves. You know, maybe whatever force inhabits this place is compelling the raiders to do it, or maybe it was just a part of the Dunwich Company's ritual. Heck, you know, maybe they were even using them for mining, though that would be very unsafe. I bring this all up because Dunwich's extremely close proximity to the hostile Children of Atom northern camps we encounter is kinda difficult to overlook, especially when you consider Kingsport Lighthouse being named after a Lovecraft setting. You know, Dunwich 2 itself is named after Lovecraft. He has this little novella called The Dunwich Horror, Dunwich Borers, you get the idea. Anyway, my point is, Bethesda only names places after Lovecraft when they are connected to this Ugg-Qual'Toth mystery. We don't see them do that randomly. There are no other Lovecraft-themed places in the game that don't share a direct connection to this Ugg-Qual'Toth storyline. You know, we keep asking, why would Bethesda do that? Why would Bethesda name this Children of Atom location after Lovecraft and not put any Lovecraft stuff into it? Unless, you know, you get the idea. Maybe what's making these people so uniquely aggressive could happen to do with the supernatural forces they are in such close proximity with. Alternatively, again, remember, there was a tremendous amount of content that was cut from this setting. You know, there was supposed to be that Confessor Vidalia character, there were those terminal entries, and probably a whole bunch more stuff that got scrubbed. It's very possible a much broader storyline was transpiring. We know that this Ugg-Qual'Toth Lovecraftian god feeds off of the souls of the dead. When people die near it, it rejuvenates itself off of it. It's why it compelled the Dunwich Company to make those sacrifices and develop such an unsafe place. It stands to reason that, you know, maybe this entire faith that's based off of sacrificing your own life in a blast could be an easy vehicle for it to infect. Even still, I haven't even gotten to the weirdest part yet. In Fallout 76, we can encounter this large cult dedicated to the worship of a creature known as the Mothman. Now, it turns out, as we exposed in that video a few months ago, that many of these Mothman cultists aren't actually worshipping the Mothman. They are worshipping a corrupted version of these Lovecraftian forces that are disguising themselves as the Mothman. Which, oh boy, doesn't that sound familiar? But these Mothman cultists have an astounding amount of stuff in common with the Children of Atom. They're mostly hostile to the player, so it's difficult to engage in dialogue with them. But when we sneak up on their characters, they have this sort of psychotic whisper we can hear them embrace as they pray to the Mothman, which sounds eerily familiar to how the Children of Atom in the Nucleus sound. Furthermore, in many Children of Atom locations across Fallout 4, both in Far Harbor and Kingsport and the Crater of Atom, we can find these interesting candles that they use made out of wax and power armor fusion cores. They're all over the place and a sort of trademark of their locations. Only the Children of Atom use these assets in the games. Well, the Mothman cultists use those exact same candles as well. Now, in fairness, this very well could just kind of be Bethesda being lazy. A tremendous number of assets were basically copied and pasted from Fallout 4 into Fallout 76 with a new purpose. They, not even changing the meshes or textures or anything, they just reused a tremendous amount of their work, which is one of my biggest criticisms about the game. But this doesn't necessarily convey anything in it of itself, but I think against the broader backdrop of what we're talking about, it's a little bit more sus. Furthermore, and this is where you're going to decide whether or not we are complete lunatics or maybe onto something, when we encounter the Mother of the Fog back in Fallout 4's Far Harbor DLC, an interesting, unique musical score plays in the background. Take a listen.
Excuse me. This can't be real.
This score is called Atom's Whisper, and believe it or not, it's kind of hidden. It doesn't appear in any of the official releases of the soundtrack. Well, it starts off and is largely dominated by a female lead vocalist doing some, vocalizing. In the background, there is a sort of synth going on, which we can isolate. Here is the synth with the vocalist and ambiance removed. Now, take a listen to this synth note, which plays in Fallout 76 when the player uses the Mothman emote, which we can get from completing an associated cult quest, or sometimes when we encounter cult locations. Do you hear it? This synth is directly inspired from the previous one. Heck, it uses the same notes, just not in the exact same tones. Okay, I'll admit, I'm beginning to feel a little bit like a certain Always Sunny character, but you get the idea. I can go on and on with these, really minute connections which straddle the line between coincidence and genuine representations of creative intent, but again, I think you get the picture. There's a lot of these weird associations, whether it's from radiation or forced ghoulification, that this Ugg-Qualtoth force shares with the god that the children of Atom are in service to. Or at least some of the children of Atom. I am not saying that I think the children of Atom are worshipping Ugg-Qualtoth. I don't necessarily believe that. I just think the connections are big enough that it is worth exploring these with you guys. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, it has been an absolute honor. An hour and 40 some minutes, about twice as long as we originally anticipated to spend on this video, but it was all in good fun. Today we investigated both scientific and terrestrial explanations behind the Children of Atom's more supernatural elements, as well as some more occult possibilities as well. Whichever of these tales you found more compelling, or perhaps you enjoyed a combination of both of them, leave a comment down below. I would love to know your thoughts on the matter. This whole thing, believe it or not, this whole thing is probably going to blow up in about a month or two, as Modifus Entertainment, the publishers and I guess you could say developers of the Fallout role-playing game, are about to release a lore book called The Winter of Atom, which I believe is scheduled to come out in June or July, but it's going to contain several hundred pages of Fallout lore with a particular lens geared towards the children of Adam, as well as some of the more occult themes you discussed before. So if we're right about these connections, we should be finding out very soon, and I hope to update you guys going forward. But that about does it all for us today. Thank you again so much for stopping by. There's a lot of ways you can spend an hour and 40 minutes, and I appreciate you doing it with us. So again, thanks for stopping by, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone. Oh, and how can I forget? Tremendous shout out to Anachronite for helping me out with a huge chunk of this video script. They were absolutely essential in getting this project done, and they've written several of these massive documents on the history of the children of Adam and their lore and whatnot, which will be linked in the description, and which I borrowed from tremendously. So huge thanks to them. If you're wondering why I sound a little bit different right now, it's because something went wrong with my mic after I finished filming this video, and so now you're listening to me on headphones. But anyway, now the video is over.